I just can't fathom what has happened. That Ian and Heather have lost their lives, and Gail has lost her life, and Donna's still in hospital, and I pray.
A family lunch turned deadly.
The Australian mushroom poisoning.
Been poisoned with death cap mushrooms.
By suspected mushroom poisoning.
Only Erin survived the lunch unscathed.
Charged with murder. Erin Patterson.
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 It's August 2023 and Erin Patterson, the country mum, is surrounded by a media pack that all want the answers to one question. Have you murdered 3 of your family with a poisoned beef Wellington?
It's a tragedy what's happened.
She does not know it, but Patterson is about to be charged with 3 murders. There is another thing that Erin doesn't know. One of the guests she poisoned will survive.
And Ian and Heather were some of the best people I've ever met. They never did anything wrong to me, and I'm so devastated about what's happened.
Erin Patterson clearly was capable of acting, not acting very well, but acting, and producing crocodile tears. And when we look back at that scene where she comes out of the house howling and wailing in apparent grief, we see that it was all an act and that she was quite capable of not only telling lies, but performing them.
Don and Gail Patterson, Erin's father and mother-in-law, are dead. So too is Heather Wilkinson, Gail's sister. They were guests at a lunch at Erin's new home in the small South Gippsland town of Leongatha. They all wanted to be here for Erin, the misfit who had mothered their grandchildren. There had been trouble with Erin. She no longer got along with their son Simon, who is still her husband. Erin Patterson feels alone, and she wants to serve the lunch to deliver some big news. What she gave her 4 guests was a last supper, a beef Wellington laced with death cap mushrooms. And then she told them about a cancer scare. It was a lie Erin thought would never leave the table. But there was one thing that she didn't count on. One of her guests, a man of God, was Ian Wilkinson. He lived to tell the tale, a tale that killed his wife, Heather, and his family, Don and Gail. Ian would later recount crucial evidence about that meal. Erin made the unusual choice of cooking individual beef Wellingtons, and she served her own portion on a different coloured plate.
Erin Patterson has put herself in a position where she's sitting not 1 metre from 4 adult people. They've never done anything as awful as kill someone else. They've never robbed her. They've never hurt her. They're kind, good people by any yardstick, I'd suggest. And yet she has formed the view that she's going to kill them to punish them in a little way, and I suspect to punish her husband.
Erin Patterson was the atheist turned Christian turned poisoner. She would be investigated by Victoria Police, the Feds, the Health Department and Child Protection. It is a firestorm that leads to her being charged with a triple murder and more. It is also one of the most talked about trials in Australian history.
She probably persuaded herself that this would be written off as some awful accident, and maybe it would have been had all 4 of these people died. But the fact that one survived probably spoiled any chance she had of beating the rap. And that meant that it got a life of its own, and it got a velocity, and of course then the story went round the world, and then it feeds off itself.
When it came to trial, Erin Patterson elected to have it closer to home, in Morwell. It's an hour and a half away from Melbourne's busy court precinct. And so the judge, the lawyers and the media pack and all onlookers descended on this small country town. Ultimately, though, there's one person everyone was here to see.
And every day we were seeing Erin sitting in the dock as she was watching the trial unfold. And then she entered the witness box. Erin, for 8 days, was giving evidence in her own trial, 3 days answering questions from her lawyer and 5 days answering questions from the Crown prosecutor.
And to me, it was really interesting seeing Erin walk up to the witness box. She had no guards sitting next to her, and I feel like in most cases where there is an accused giving evidence, they would normally have some type of security around them, but not Erin. When Erin gave evidence, we saw her grab tissues quite a bit. She would dab her face, but I never saw any tears rolling down her eyes, and I think that says a lot about a murderer.
It's clear to anybody who sat through the trial that Erin Patterson has told a litany of lies. She lied about whether she foraged for mushrooms. She originally told police, no, she never foraged. She lied about the likely source of some of her dried mushrooms being certain Asian shops in suburban Melbourne. Well, when the police took her back and showed her this shop or that shop or another shop, she couldn't point out which one was as the place where she'd supposedly put poisoned mushrooms. She told Porkies about the dehydrator. He said, no, she didn't take a dehydrator. Dry death cap mushrooms and then take the dehydrator to the tip and get rid of it to get rid of evidence. She claimed not. Why do you hide things like that unless it is consciousness of guilt? That is a question that the jury must have thought about.
Well, she buys the dehydrator and she keeps the invoice. As she's collecting mushrooms, whether she's buying them or foraging them, she dries them in this dehydrator so she can keep them for longer periods of time. Now, we heard some evidence that over a period of time she was hiding mushrooms in her children's muffins and things like this because they didn't particularly like mushrooms. So she's basically seeing what she can do with mushrooms. In the lead up to this disastrous lunch, she's keeping dehydrated mushrooms in some form of container. She says that she believes they got mixed up and that somehow she's foraged or bought death cap mushrooms and they've ended up in this meal.
I think what a lot of murderers do, and even people who are relatively intelligent, they become so fixated on executing the crime, I'm going to shoot him or do this, that they don't think through the next steps, what happens next. And of course, the most important bit is what happens next. Have you actually covered your tracks? Have you actually sorted out an alibi and all that stuff? And 99% of them haven't. They're just trusting to luck that they can sort of run away and throw a few things out the window of the car and that they'll get away with it. Erin Patterson clearly hadn't thought through the ramifications of what she was doing. She thought she was very clever, looking up stuff about death cap mushrooms and what, as if she's living in some Agatha Christie novel, go out and pick mushrooms in, 1928, poison people. But life isn't Agatha Christie novel, particularly in the 21st century, because we have a lot of ways of catching up with people scientifically, and inevitably within a matter of days, there were huge suspicions about her movements and actions and motivations.
But there are bigger questions that remain. Perhaps the biggest is why.
Let's remember that most murders, this is not all murders, but most murders are over not much. Now, when someone plans to rob an institution of $1 million, it's quite a logical crime. Say, well, if I can get $1 million, that'll make me rich. I can buy, I can pay off a mortgage or whatever it might be. You can do with lots of money. There's a logical explanation and motive. But most murders aren't that logical.
Ultimately, we will never know why Erin plotted to murder her family. It will never make sense. We will never understand her motives. She will take her plots and her schemes and her reasons to her prison cell, where she seems almost certain to spend the rest of her natural life.